Hello, my name is Colin and welcome to the Virtual DM. In this video, we're going to take a look at the sound links functionality that is available in Fantasy Grounds Unity. Now this video will be part one of a four-part series. In the first video, we are going to take a look at the local sound capabilities. In part two, we will take a look at Syrinscape. Part 3 will take a look at the VLC extension that can be used as part of sound links. And in part 4, we'll look at how you can deliver all of these sounds to your players during your sessions. So let's get started. Now, before we get into how sound links work, it's important to understand that Fantasy Grounds Unity is not an audio player. It simply gives us the ability to trigger sounds, whether they are online, like with Syrinscape, or opening local audio files, which will play on your local media player. The reason this is important to understand is because some people are confused into thinking that Fantasy Grounds Unity is playing the sounds, which means that their players will be able to hear those in their session, their instance of Fantasy Grounds, which is not the case. Now, in part 4 of this series, we will look into how you can deliver those sounds to your players, but it's really important right up front to understand Fantasy Grounds Unity gives us the ability to trigger those sounds. It does not play the sounds. So let's get into our setup. Okay, so the first thing we want to do as part of our SoundLink setup is to create a new folder in our Fantasy Grounds folder called Sounds. Now, this folder needs to be inside of the Fantasy Grounds folder in order for Fantasy Grounds to access the sound files that we want to play. Now, this is separate than what will happen with Syrinscape, but we'll look at that in another video. So the easiest way to do this is open up Fantasy Grounds to our startup screen. We're going to come up here to the top left corner and we're going to click on our folder icon. This will open us up directly into our Fantasy Grounds folder. Now in here with our folder structure, we are going to add that sounds folder. So just right click, come down to new folder, and we are going to change that folder to sounds. This will be the folder that we will copy our sound files into in order to play local sounds. Again, this will be different than what we'll do with Syrinscape. Once you have created that folder, you can go ahead and load up a campaign where we are going to now activate the sound links part of Fantasy Grounds Unity. Okay, so now we are loaded into our campaign, and the next thing we need to do is activate the sound links functionality. So what we want to do is we want to come up to our options icon. We're going to click there to open our options menu. Scroll down through your menu options until you get to sound enable. And what we're going to do is we're going to check on this little box right here, this little circle, and that is going to activate the sound capabilities. With that, we'll now see up here we have a sound context button that opens up this new window, and we have a sound set button here in library that opens up our sound sets window. So now we have created our folder for our local sounds to go into. We have activated the sounds functionality within Fantasy Grounds Unity. We're ready to use it. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at how you load sound files for Fantasy Grounds to be able to trigger. The first part of this is to get your sound files into that newly created sounds folder inside of the Fantasy Grounds folder. So I am going to begin here. I'm going to open up a folder that I have 2 sound files I'd like to use in. And I am also going to open up my Fantasy Grounds folder where we created that new sounds file. So in the first part here, I want to copy those sound files, into the sounds folder. So I am going to select these 2 files. I'm going to copy them. I'm going to come over here, open up my sounds folder, and I'm going to paste those 2 sound files into that folder. Once they are in that sounds folder inside of Fantasy Grounds will have access to them to open them up to play. So in order to create the trigger, what we need to do is to select the file. While we hold down Shift, you're going to right click on that file. And you will see you have an option here that is copy as path. Now, if I was just to normally right click on this file, you'll see I do not get the option to copy as path. And you need to make sure that the link you are copying is the copy as path link. So again, I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to right click on the file. I'm going to come down to copy as path. Okay, we're now inside of our Fantasy Grounds window. We are going to come up here to our sound context button and click on that button. We're going to come to the settings button and click on that button. And that is going to open our sound setting window. Now we have 2 options here. We have Syrinscape and we have File. For our local sounds, we want to work with the File button. So I will click on File, and that opens us into the File section. So in order to import a trigger for this sound that I just did the copy as path for, I'm going to click on File Import. And here it says enter 1 file per path line. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to paste using Control V. You could also paste by right clicking, coming to the clipboard, and then selecting paste that way will also work. So now we can see our copy as pathway to that particular sound file. I come down here and I select File Import. And now we can see we have this horn, call to arms. We have created a trigger for that sound. And I keep specifically using the word trigger because we are triggering the sound file to open that is inside of the sounds folder inside of our Fantasy Grounds folder. So in order to play that sound file, I'm going to click on this button, this little play button. What that's going to do is open that sound file that we have in our sounds folder with whatever our default media player is. So for myself, that's Windows Media Player. So when I click on this button, first thing it's going to do is ask me, and this is a default for any time Fantasy Grounds Unity is opening any type of link. It's going to make sure that I want to allow that link to open. So I always select yes to all, so I won't have to say yes every time one of these play. So yes to all. My media player opens and it plays that sound on the media player. So again, as to our earlier discussion, it's important to understand Fantasy Grounds Unity is not playing that sound. My default media player is playing that sound. So I can play that again by hitting play, because it is the media player that is playing that sound file. So everything related to that sound file in terms of volume, looping, anything like that is all relevant to the default media player. Now, if I go back and reopen my two files here, I just want to show one last thing. So I have my folder where I have my sound files, and I have my sounds folder. If you forget and you use the links from here, so I select my call to arms, I hold shift, I copy as path, and I go through the process of copying that into Fantasy Grounds, that is not going to work because it isn't in the sounds folder inside of Fantasy Grounds. It must be in there. The second thing that I want to show you related to our sounds folder is we don't have to import all of these one at a time. We can import the links for multiple. So here I am going to use Control. I'm going to select my first file and my second file. I'm then going to hold down Shift. I'll right click in here, copy as path. Now I come here to my file import, and I am going to click inside my import and Control V. And now you will see both sound file links imported at the same time. And you can do that with multiple links if you want to import a bunch of sound links all at the same time. So if I come down here, file to import, you'll see it's copied a second version of my horn call to arms, and now also added in that monster roll file. One question that sometimes comes up is what type of audio files can you play? Again, that will be dependent upon the media player that you are using and what type of audio files that it can play. So in this particular case, I have a combination of MP3 files and WAV files. So I have a monster roar here. That being a WAV file. And again, I have my call to arms, which is an MP3 file. So it's able to trigger any type of sound file that can play on your particular media player. And that's how you get all of this to work. We're now going to go in and take a look at how you can use these links right in your stories. So one of the really nice things you can do with these sound links is embed them right into your story, so it's easy to trigger these sounds when you want to use them during gameplay. So in order to do that, you want to open up your story, and in this case I have a very simple little story here called Battle with the Beast. I have two sounds that I'd like to use, my horn call to arms and my monster roar. So here in my story, as the beast approaches the soldiers, they will use their horn to summon the others. So I come over here to my sounds. I'm going to left click and drag the button for this sound over and drop it right into my story. When the beast hears the horn, it will roar with disapproval. And I'm going to come here to my monster roar. Same thing, drag that over, drop that right into my story. So now during gameplay, I don't need to have both of these windows open in order to play these sounds. I can just have my story. And when we get to the portion where I want to play the horn sound, I will left click on the button and it is going to play that horn sound for me. So it makes it really easy to trigger these sounds during your gameplay without having to have our sound settings window open. All right, well, that's a wrap for this video. Hopefully you found some value in the topic. I think this SoundLink stuff is a fantastic part of Fantasy Grounds that unfortunately a lot of people don't use because they don't quite understand how to use it. Now, this is part one of a 4-part series. In the next video, we'll take a look at Syrinscape and how you can use that. Part 3, we'll take a look at the VLC extension that's available to add on to this functionality. And in Part 4, we'll take a look at how you can send all of this audio to your players during your gameplay. If you subscribe to the channel, thank you very much. I very much appreciate it. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Like those videos, comment. It lets myself and YouTube know that you are finding value in the content and in the videos. So thanks very much. Thanks for watching and happy gaming.